You know what? There's something really odd about Alastor's powers, like the way they work in general, combined with their rather elusive origins. It makes me think there's a lot more to the radio demon than initially meets the eye. Not to mention, what exactly is his connection to Hell's 7-year mystery? Also, why on earth did Rosie send Al to the hotel specifically? I will tell you this much, it's probably not what you'd expect. These are just a few of the things I aim to cover in this theory analysis. Please keep in mind that this will be an in-between hybrid of a theory and analysis style video, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. For starters, let's take a closer look at the moment Alastor gained his powers. He performs some kind of an occult ritual, surrounded by a bunch of peculiar symbols that are oddly reminiscent of the ones from the ceremony that takes place during the first episode of Hell of a Boss. This is where Helava also casually name drops the term known as the root of evil, which will be quite relevant moving forward. Another thing that's noteworthy is how Viv herself has teased that the closest things to gods in this universe are these two entities that briefly appeared at the start of the show. They're effectively the personified versions of good and evil, which makes me think these eerie rituals have some kind of a connection to this evil entity specifically. One interesting thing about Alastor's summoning circle is the color it glows when it's activated, and I haven't seen anyone else notice this small detail about the scene. Initially, it glows a vibrant red, but after his deal with Rosie, it turns green instead, which I find quite odd. Rosie's powers have a very different color and hue to them, so where's the red coming from? Something isn't quite adding up here. Another thing that's been teased about Hazbin's future is a rather mysterious character who's known as Rue, and a lot of people assume she is somehow related to the god of evil I mentioned earlier. If we take a quick look at her last teased design from a few years ago, some things instantly stand out to me. From within, she seems to be able to spawn these weird black tentacle abominations that are also covered with eyes, and that imagery sure does remind me of a couple of things that we've already seen throughout the show so far. Oh yeah, and more importantly, her primary color is a very vibrant shade of red, which does make me think of the summoning circle I was talking about a few moments ago. What I'm trying to get at here is the following. I think Alastor can somehow directly tap into Rue's own powers, and I have a few extra things that I'd like to point out about this. Alastor's powers oftentimes look like a bunch of black tentacles that are summoned from somewhere below. Want to know what else they remind me of? Black roots. Or should I just call them the roots of evil instead? Plus, these creepy eye motifs also showed up when Alastor created that shield from Season 1's finale. Where exactly do these powers, roots, and eyes come from? Could it be that they spawn from a layer that's actually below Hell itself? You can think of it as an area that's similar to the Upside Down from Stranger Things. If such a place really does exist, I have a theory on what that location might be, but I'll get to it later into the video. Although I do want to tease that Rue might be located there. Now, let's go back to the summoning scene. We've established that when the circle glows red, maybe that represents Rue's powers, which would tie into the whole root of evil concept. Hypothetically speaking, if Rosie's the flower in the situation, while Rue embodies the roots, would that make Alastor the stem of this metaphorical plant? His soul and powers do seem to be represented by the color green after all. Also, in Hell, Alastor is a radio demon, and maybe this is just a clever way of conveying the way his soul has the innate ability to receive and amplify Rue's dark signals from the other side. He then uses his staff as a literal radio antenna to broadcast that evil energy throughout Hell. This would explain why he was so upset when his staff was broken. After all, a radio can only do so much without a properly functioning antenna. The weaker signals resulted in his powers being weakened as well. And let's not forget about Rosie's involvement in all of this. Everything about her is a big mystery, and Viv did tease in the Season 1 commentary track that she's a big part of the show.
There's a lot. Rosie is a big part of the show.
Vivian also said in an interview, quote, "The Rosie and Alastor deal is the first stepping stone in a much bigger story that involves so much, moving into Season 3. Based on that, Rosie seems to be a very important character moving forward. During her deal with Alastor, rather than telling him he'd be the strongest in Hell, she made sure to specify that he'd be the strongest sinner instead. In my eyes, this automatically disqualifies her from being a regular sinner, since it wouldn't make any sense for her to have the ability to make Al stronger than herself. What exactly is she then? I've got multiple ideas about that, but I'll gradually unpack them as we go along, so let's put a pin in that thought for now. Instead, I'd like to address this one thing that's puzzled me for a while. What exactly are Rosie's true motives for sending Al to the hotel seemingly out of the blue? For the longest time, I had no answer to that question, but I was lucky enough to stumble upon an absolutely genius theory from the user Spamforos on Reddit. Their insanely clever interpretation of this specific conversation between Rosie and Al genuinely gagged me. Alastor mentions how he's been running around hell for years on some fruitless crusade. It's a very small detail, but the phrasing fruitless crusade feels oddly specific in that context, and it might just be some of the most brilliant foreshadowing from the show so far. Here's why. This whole fruitless crusade thing is basically an allusion or callback to the fruit of knowledge that was teased at the start of the show, aka Eve's apple, and the gist of the theory goes something like this. For whatever reason, Rosie wants to get her hands on that very specific apple, and she tasked Alastor with finding it. Realistically speaking, if anyone knows about its whereabouts, it would be the Morningstar family. When Lilith disappeared 7 years ago, Rosie used that window of opportunity to her advantage, so she made Alastor look all over the Pride Ring in order to try and find the apple's location. His shadow-based powers made him the perfect man for doing that kind of a job on the down low. But after all that time, he was unable to locate it. The most promising new lead he had was Charlie's recently opened hotel, so he was sent there to investigate it. To cap things off, Spamfrost thinks that Rosie wants the apple because she has an emporium and she likes to collect rare artifacts, which is quite interesting, but I personally have other ideas regarding her true motivations. Although they did make a comment that goes in the same direction I was thinking as well, with the apple being a way to summon Rue, but they're unsure as to why or how that would be the case. Now, fortunately for you in the audience, I do have some potential answers for those rather elusive question marks. Alright, from this point onwards, I want to heavily expand on this whole Apple search concept with my own original theories and ideas, since I think there's something special about it. Things are about to get even crazier moving forward, so buckle up. It's actually kind of ridiculous just how much sense it makes for the apple to be hidden at the hotel. Hear me out for a bit. What's the one constant element that's been present throughout both the old and new versions of the hotel up to this point? The apple motifs. These visual clues are quite literally scattered throughout the entirety of the hotel's interior. There's apples everywhere you look, on the windows, furniture, paintings, decorations, carpets and floors, guardrails, the reception desk itself. Even the wallpapers are filled with them. Not to mention that on the exterior of the new hotel, there's big red arrows pointing towards a gigantic apple that's at the forefront of the building. It's almost as if it's being intentionally advertised in plain sight, which would make for some pretty great foreshadowing, not gonna lie. Even the logo of the series itself has an apple right on top of it, with an X marking the spot. Am I insane, or am I actually onto something here? Maybe I have officially lost it since I'm about to do an analysis on the hotel's wallpapers. In the pilot episode, the wallpaper looks like this. We have the apple at the center, a pair of hands trying to grasp it, some snakes, hearts, eyes, and also an infinity symbol on top. And here's what things look like in the Addict music video. The apple, heart, snake, and hand symbolism is still there, but this time we also have some additional angelic wings, triangular shapes, and the overall design is quite different. Most noticeably, the snake is taking the shape of the number 8, but it could also be interpreted as the infinity symbol. Then we have the definitive version of the wallpaper, which has remained unchanged in both seasons of the show so far. The wings, hands, eyes, snake, triangular shapes, and of course the apple are still present. And arguably, the 8 or the infinity symbol is still part of the design, but it's way more subtle this time around. In theory, yes, these are just wallpapers, but they're undeniably baked into the show's visual identity at this point, and that's not on accident, it's by design. This wallpaper motif can be found on promo materials, on the merchandising itself, or on its packaging, and on the trading cards too. Alongside the logo, it's very much become another part of Hazbin's branding and image as a whole, effectively making it the perfect place to advertise the show's biggest secrets right there in plain sight for all to see. If all of this wallpaper imagery truly turns out to be an elaborate way of foreshadowing what's to come, words cannot even describe just how shook I'll be. That aside, in-universe, these symbols all seem to heavily tie into upcoming story elements. As the video goes on, most of these visual motifs will continue popping up in one way or another, so keep that in mind. Let's start with the most unassuming visual cue, since it might actually be connected to the hotel's true nature. I'm talking about that number 8 or infinity symbol motif. Also, these triangular shapes sort of remind me of upside down keyholes, but maybe that's just me. Now, this is where Keekee comes into play. Not only is she meant to be the living embodiment of the hotel, but she's also its key. Just like those apple motifs, Keekee's watchful eye is plastered throughout the entirety of the hotel. By the way, Keekee is also part of the logo, and speaking of that, if you look at the little animation from the start of each episode, her trajectory seems to form an infinity symbol. So, what the hell is up with the infinity symbolism? Honestly, I'm still trying to figure it out myself. Although, when it comes to the number 8 in general, there will be more on that later. But right now, Keekee is the focus, and she sure seems to be a rather powerful entity, all things considered. She can shift around the layout of the hotel on a whim, and if we take a closer look at the hotel's map, the entire building straight up looks like a gigantic maze. To me, it definitely sounds like the ideal place to hide something as small as an apple. But the original hotel wasn't anywhere near as big, and it's safe to assume that Alastor had more than enough time to look through every nook, cranny, and shadow of the building before it collapsed. Yet he found nothing, so what's up with that? Well, maybe the apple is located within some kind of a pocket dimension that's inside of the hotel. I don't think it's all that far-fetched, considering Lucifer spontaneously created a liminal space during more than anything. Also, we know for a fact that Keekee can manipulate the hotel, so is she perhaps the key to opening up the true location of the apple? It's food for thought, I guess. Okay, that aside, before Charlie gave the hotel a new life, it seems to have been abandoned for many years. I wonder if Keekee was there the whole time, watching over the hotel as the keeper of its secrets. In case anything went wrong, she could simply sound the alarm. Since Lucifer can teleport anywhere on a whim, I doubt he was all that concerned with the hotel's security, even if it housed the all-powerful apple itself. And speaking of Lu, this whole apple thing seems to be an intrinsic part of his story. It could even be said that in many ways, it's the core of his character. Fruity puns aside, if you think about it, the apple falling into Eve's hands was the event that kickstarted the show's entire narrative. As a brief side tangent, when I was listening to the audio track from the first episode of Season 1, I did find it rather interesting when it was revealed that Viv storyboarded the entire intro scene all by herself. She had a very specific vision in mind, and she did initially try to hand it over to another artist, but they couldn't get it quite right since it was a complicated sequence to pull off. In my eyes, this conveys the following. The opening scene isn't just a simple introduction to the series. It's actually a foundational part of the storyline, so it needed to be accurate no matter what. If you think about it, this is the perfect spot to carefully foreshadow pivotal plot points that will continue to be relevant for the remainder of the show, such as the aforementioned gods of good and evil. So with that in mind, I'll be making some callbacks to specific details from this introductory scene when needed. With that out of the way, we know that Lucifer gifted Eve with a cursed fruit of knowledge, which led to him and Lilith being sentenced and banished to hell for an eternity. What about Eve though? Whatever happened to her? Did she also get punished for allowing herself to be corrupted? Also, when it comes to the remainder of the apple itself, nothing is mentioned about its whereabouts, which is a bit odd considering just how dangerous it is. If we take into account all of the apple symbolism that's tied to Lucifer's character, I assume he was tasked with being the guardian of the cursed apple in order to prevent such a calamity from ever being unleashed upon the world ever again. Plus, Viv did tease in an interview that Season 3 will explore what Lu's actual role is within this universe, so maybe that's what she was alluding to. And going back to the whole wallpaper thing, the snake does look like it's trying to protect the apple, with the angelic wings potentially being a callback to Lucifer's divine punishment, or maybe it's a way to reference his heavenly origins. Alright, moving along from that, I still need to address whatever is going on with Eve, and I've got some ideas, so here we go. We know Eve took a bite from the apple. Then what? Maybe she was cursed, and then transformed into Ru, and now she's banished in another realm that is in neither heaven or hell. But here's an alternative option. Maybe Eve remained human after taking a bite of the fruit, but for the rest of her days, she was cursed with spreading the wicked seeds of knowledge to the rest of humanity. Which would maybe explain how people on Earth came to know about those very specific rituals that pay tribute to the root of evil. That information probably got passed down generation by generation. And assuming she was still a mortal being who could perish like any other regular human out there, when she inevitably reached the end of her lifespan, her soul likely ended up in that extra realm that I've been teasing so far. Or how about this for a curveball? Here's a different pathway where Rosie comes into play instead. What if Eve transformed into Rosie after taking a bite of the apple, with the added side effect that she now has an insatiable hunger that makes her crave flesh until she can find the rest of the fruit. She wants to consume the remainder of the apple so she can complete her transformation. That way, Rosie would bloom anew into Ru, after shedding her old petals once and for all. Taking a bite of the fruit all that time ago would also explain why Rosie is such a powerful entity, but I've got a bit of a problem with this idea overall. This would only truly work if Rosie takes a more villainous route with her character, and I'm not all that convinced about it. After all, she did seem quite protective of Charlie at the end of Season 2. She doesn't strike me as inherently evil due to her actions to keep everyone safe. Plus, isn't it odd how Rosie has a statue of the Morningstar family in her garden? In the commentary track, Viv has teased and called Rosie a motherly figure for Charlie, which does make me wonder and think about Lilith as well. Also, Rosie's powers have always struck me as more heavenly due to their overall glowy nature. They look weirdly similar to Adam and Lucifer's own set of abilities, so what's up with that? This all makes me think there's some kind of a connection between Rosie and Lilith. The whole statue thing is already suspicious enough in my eyes, but then Viv's comments about Rosie being a motherly figure, combined with the awfully convenient timing of the 7-year overlap that involves not only Lilith but also Rosie, overall seem like hints that these characters share some kind of a common link. Let's explore some potential options that go in that direction. Lute did mention that Lilith made a deal with Adam, which is likely what allows her to stay up in heaven. But isn't that odd, considering she's the one who started the resistance movement in hell? And you know what's even weirder? The way the show seems to intentionally hide her eyes in every shot that she's in. Even the official TCG plays into this idea by obscuring her face. The only exceptions to this rule are these family portraits, which seem to be from a long time ago. Has something changed about her eyes, specifically? And going back to that card of her, she's doing a shush gesture, almost as if she's teasing that she's hiding something. Could this be an implication that her deal in heaven involves some kind of a general gag order, where she is barred from communicating with anyone from hell? It would explain why we haven't heard her speak so far, but also why she's been ignoring her phone. Another thing we've got to address from this card is that creepy grin. It's somewhat reminiscent of the God of Evil's smile, so could this be an indication that she's been possessed by an evil force? But so far, in the show itself, she doesn't look quite as eerie, and I really doubt the angels from heaven would simply allow Lilith to reside there if she was truly a threat to their kingdom. So maybe we can cross out the idea that she's been possessed by anything. Alright, so let's assume Lilith isn't villainous or evil in any way. What else can be said about her character? I actually came up with 3 distinctive theories regarding this, so I'll go through them one by one in an attempt to make things less confusing, since they all have alternative scenarios. In theory number 1, let's bring Rosie back into this, since I did mention her powers seem oddly heaven-coded. Lilith and Adam were the first humans, so it's not that far of a stretch to think that their overall power levels are equal considering their origins. Plus, I wouldn't be surprised if this also resulted in their abilities having similar visual traits. What if Rosie is nothing more than just a puppet or a facade, and a sneaky way for Lilith to use her own powers to do more discreet work that doesn't involve her presence or public persona? Think of it this way, maybe Rosie is an empty shell that Lilith can fully control or inhabit, even if it's from a long distance away. I mean, Rosie's powers do look like a bunch of strings, which evokes the kind of imagery that's typically associated with marionette dolls. This would also be the perfect loophole for Lilith to use if she really was silenced by heaven. Just because Lilith might be under a deal that prevents her from speaking to anyone in hell, it doesn't mean that the same conditions would apply to Rosie as well, since technically, they aren't the same person. If Rosie truly is a doll of some kind, maybe Lilith designed her to have the same likeness as cannibal sinners, since they all seem to share the same easily identifiable characteristics, such as their black hollow eyes and sharp teeth. It would be the ideal way for Rosie to blend in, with the added benefit that Lilith could covertly keep tabs on all of the overlords and their shady activities. And that family statue might be an indication of when this Rosie persona was initially crafted, likely when Charlie was much younger. Okay, let's put this theory aside since I want to dive into the next one. Theory number 2 is also somewhat unusual and it revolves around Lilith and Eve. I think there's actually a good chance that they're related somehow. They might be sisters or even twins. Here's why. Lilith has a very specific characteristic, where her hair seems to be naturally flowing at all times. This especially caught my attention after the commentary track made sure to highlight this aspect about her design.
That's a fun thing too, is that Lilith's hair is constantly on a...
Yeah. Yes,
like
I wanted her hair constantly flowing.
Charlie also seems to share this trait when she unravels her hair, typically while in her demonic form or when her emotions are heightened, so this might be some sort of an inherited genetic quirk that came from Lilith's side. If we go back to the show's opening scene where Lilith and Eve's silhouettes can be seen, they've both got the same flowy hair thing going on. Sure, maybe this idea is just a stretch, but I thought it was worth pointing out at the very least. Plus, Lucifer did imply that he had a good time with Eve during his confrontation with Adam. If you think about it, it would make a ton of sense for Lou to have the hots for Eve back in the day, especially if she really is Lilith's sister or twin. This whole twin idea could also explain the mystery aspect behind Lilith. In those old family portraits, she seems so happy, but in that flashback from More Than Anything, she acts quite cold and distant towards Lucifer. It would be fascinating if this whole Lilith enigma was the result of some kind of a sister swap situation. Lilith and Eve could easily switch places as long as they're identical twins. Maybe Eve took over Lilith's public persona and duties long ago. In that case, the one who's up in heaven right now would actually be Eve, not Lilith. But the problem in general when it comes to this whole sister swap concept would be the following. I feel like there's no way in hell Lucifer or Charlie wouldn't have immediately noticed that something was off or different about Lilith. Now, on to the next one. Theory number 3 puts a bit of an alternative twist to Theory 2, so it's much shorter in nature. It still plays around with the concept of Eve and Lilith being sisters, but this time Rosie is also relevant. At some point way earlier into the video, I mentioned the possibility that Rosie might be the form or persona that Eve took after taking a bite of the cursed apple. So in this situation specifically, Rosie would actually be Lilith's sister. If that were the case, this would somewhat explain Rosie's general fondness towards the morning stars. When she called herself Auntie Rosie around Charlie, maybe she meant it quite literally. And with that, this extra Lilith theory segment is over. Alright, I've gone over Lilith, Rosie, and Eve, but I want to get back to Rue as well. Although, there are some other things that need to be addressed before that. This is where the 7-year mystery, but also the number 8, officially come back into play. Viv confirmed in an interview that it is in fact Lilith who is calling Charlie at the end of season 2. What made her finally break her silence? We do know that Lilith had a deal with Adam, but oddly enough, even after his death, she never reached out to anyone in hell. Did something happen that broke off her deal, or was this some kind of a timed contract that simply reached the end of its lifespan? In the first episode from season 2, Lucifer did mention how it's been close to 8 years since Lilith vanished. Maybe her deal allowed or forced her to stay up in heaven for up to 8 years, with a condition that she could no longer use her voice or words to rile up the denizens of hell. Her inability to contact her family was an unfortunate side effect of this arrangement, and considering how devious Adam was, I wouldn't be surprised if he took advantage of the fact that Lilith could no longer speak up, which is why he also immediately struck a deal or arrangement with Lucifer 7 years ago. Lu simply gave a free pass to the exterminations, which isn't all that surprising if we take into account his general disdain and disinterest in sinners as a whole. Lucifer didn't care as long as they agreed to his terms to spare the Hellborns from all the carnage. Lilith couldn't really do anything to prevent the exterminations, since her hands were completely tied in this hypothetical situation. If we then jump to the end of season 2, after the whole Vox fiasco unfolded, it's implied that some extra time elapsed while things were calming down at the hotel. With that in mind, it's quite possible that it's officially been 8 years since Lilith was gone. This also meant that her fixed-term contract to stay silent ended, which finally allowed Lilith to give Charlie a call back at the end of the season. With the 7-year mystery out of the way, I think it's rather interesting how this specific number is a recurring element throughout the hellaverse. We've got 7 deadly sins, but also 7 layers to hell. But you know what? Maybe the number 8 has some weight behind it as well. What if Lilith isn't the only one who will be returning after this 8-year time limit expired? Did those 8 years actually represent a countdown of sorts for an upcoming calamity? More specifically, I think Rue is coming as well. She's been biding her time, growing her powers during these years, and now she's ready to strike. Just like everyone in the audience, Rue has also been a spectator to everything that's happened so far. Her all-seeing eyes are scattered throughout hell, but still, she's nowhere to be seen, so what's up with that? Based on her last known design, she seems to be wearing chains and shackles, so my guess is that she's actually in prison somewhere, in some kind of a dungeon, waiting for the right conditions to be met so she can set herself free. I theorize that she's actually located in a hidden 8th layer of hell, which on paper is a place that shouldn't exist. It's probably the same location where the souls of slain sinners ended up as well. Maybe these creepy eyes from Rue's design, but also the eyes that can be seen in hell, ultimately represent the same thing. They're the visible manifestations of all of the souls that were lost due to the exterminations. Rue seems to be able to open or close these eyes anywhere in hell. We even got to see a glimpse of her point of view during the Scream Rain episode. These eyes seem to act like one-way windows that allow her to see everything that's going on in hell. Have you heard of the saying, the eyes are the windows of the soul? In this situation, I guess it would be quite literally true. Viv did say in an interview that we'd eventually find out what happened to the souls of the sinners who perished in hell, so I guess we should keep our eyes peeled for that. Although, this does make me wonder, was Rue actually the one who orchestrated the exterminations all along? If each fallen soul adds to her power levels, it makes perfect sense that the exterminations were exactly what she wanted. Even if the exterminations have officially ended, we can assume that Rue is more powerful than ever before. So what's preventing her from breaking free of her chains? I think it might just involve the cursed apple. My best guess is that she needs to find someone who is a compatible host, who will then eat the remainder of the fruit in order for her to gain the ability to physically manifest in hell. This is where I'd like to highlight Rue's initial design. Doesn't she look strikingly similar to Lilith here? Is Lilith actually in danger? Was this why she was up in heaven all along? This makes me think she's the one who's most at risk here. Other potential candidates for eating the apple would be Charlie, Rosie, and as a wildcard pick, I'll throw Loot in there as well. Whether the apple and these characters will be a part of Rue's awakening ultimately remains to be seen, but we do know for a fact that it's only a matter of time until she officially makes her entrance. And now for the final stretch of the video, I'd like to take things full circle and get back to Alastor, since there's some stuff that still needs to be addressed about him. Viv did tease that he would take on a more villainous role in Season 3, and she also teased that each season of the show has a representative color. In Season 1 it's red, while in Season 2 it's blue. Apparently, Season 3's main colors are going to be green and purple, which immediately makes me think of Alastor and Lilith. Whether they'll be allies or foes remains to be seen, but it definitely looks like their dynamic will play a pivotal role in Season 3's narrative. Who knows, Alastor breaking free from Rosie's leash might be the reason why Lilith finally decided to contact Charlie again. Is everyone at the hotel in danger because of Alastor's newfound freedom? There's a moment in the pilot that may be foreshadowing this. Vaggie mentions how getting involved with Alastor might lead to everyone being erased, and she's probably right. He did say that once he unclipped his wings, he would end up pulling all the strings, so he's clearly up to no good. The fact that he decided to stay at the hotel despite breaking free is a bad omen for what's to come. If the whole Apple search theory ends up being true, it makes sense that he willingly went back there. Lucifer now has an obvious target on his back since Alastor realized that only Lou knows the apple's true location. He's probably hoping that getting his hands on the apple will be the one thing that finally satiates his endless hunger for destruction and chaos. Maybe this is what the hands from the hotel's various wallpaper designs are trying to symbolize. While on that subject, I can't help but think of that time when Rosie called Alastor a snake. I previously thought the snake from the wallpaper represented Lucifer as the guardian of the apple, but what if this imagery is meant to represent Alastor's greedy desire to swallow the apple's powers for the sake of his sinister master plan? And who knows, maybe Al's soul was always meant to be this powerful, even without Rosie's intervention. The show has made it abundantly clear that Alastor's power levels are such an anomaly, to the point where he single-handedly ended up shaking Hell's status quo. Even powerful overlords like Vox and Zestial seem to question Alastor's enigmatic nature. When Rosie first got in contact with Alastor, she mentioned how she'd never seen a soul like his ever before. Hearing his voice also made her realize that he was the one, which is rather cryptic and foreboding, to say the least. This makes me wonder if it's always been Alastor's destiny to be an agent of evil, since his soul seems to have some kind of a natural affinity to the root of evil. What if Rosie was simply trying to delay the inevitable by intercepting and trapping his soul for as long as possible? Having him under her leash meant that she could delay and prevent him from carrying out Rue's own wicked agendas for Hell. Or maybe she just wanted to trick him so she could make use of his exceptional powers. During their final meetup, she straight up said that he really is a demon, and Alastor simply reminded her that she knew about his true nature all along. Whether he has any ties with Rue remains to be seen, but you know what? The eye on his staff looks oddly similar to the eyes that are scattered throughout Hell, and during the summoning scene, a bottle can be seen in the background, and to me it looks like some sort of an apple-based beverage. These recurring motifs make me inclined to believe that some kind of a connection does exist. I've also previously played around with the idea that Rosie might be Lilith's marionette doll. What if to an extent, the same is true for Alastor, except he's ultimately meant to be a puppet for Rue, and he's got the sole mission to set her free once again. We can see stitches all over his body, which makes me think his demonic form is also meant to look like some kind of a cursed voodoo doll. Is this why he keeps Nifty around? Sewing and gigantic needles do seem to be her specialties after all. Alright, and with that, my work here is officially done. So, what do you think? Am I just crazy at this point, or am I genuinely cooking something here?